Get started. Welcome everyone to the Oliver Brand Memorial Lecture Series, the Global Lectures Uniting Everyone, or GLUE. My name is Morgan Greenleaf. I'll be your host and moderator today from ACME POCT. Today's talk is an awesome one. It's the language of innovation. When clinicians and engineers talk, patients benefit. And I'm joined today by two esteemed members of our community, Drs. Lokesh Guglani and Dr. Hong Yo. Lokesh from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and Dr. Hong Yo here from Georgia Tech. So first, as a reminder, this is in memorial of Oliver Brand, who is the founding PI for the ACME POCT. And we honor him with a special fund here at Georgia Tech. So if you are interested in supporting students, this will go to support stipends for students who work at the Institute for Management Systems, where we're physically located. You can scan this code or click this link here. And we're in debt to Dr. Brand for helping start ACME POCT and for all the great work he did. So ACME, the enormous acronym, the Atlanta Center for Microsystems Engineered Point of Care Technology. We're a combination of Emory University, Georgia Tech, and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. We're based in Atlanta, obviously. And we're part of the POCT network supported by NIBIB. And essentially, we help startup and early diagnostic companies to accelerate their technology towards market, towards translation through a combination of services. And today, you're hearing from Core 4, which is the dissemination core, where we're trying to talk about the process of innovation and the process of moving point-of-care diagnostics to market. One announcement for folks that are interested, ACME will be hosting the Healthcare Diagnostics Launchpad. This will be March 5th, 2026 here in Atlanta. And this will be an in-person event where we're highlighting companies who have previously been supported by ACME. We'll have pitches, we'll have investors, we'll have folks from the NIH, and it will be an excellent opportunity to hear about products that are on the market and raising money and trying to get to market. So if you're interested, you can see the URL there, and maybe Angie can stick it in the chat as we go along. And we hope to see you in Atlanta in March. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to a short presentation by Dr. Guglani and then Dr. Hong Yo, and then we'll move on to a fireside conversation about their partnership.
Thank you. So I thought it would be a great idea to start off this conversation with a recent clinical project that we've been involved with together, and just sort of explaining the genesis of this whole idea and how it came about, and just starting off with what was the clinically unmet need that we were trying to solve here. So I'll be talking a little bit about this project we've been involved with together, which is focused on a point-of-care method for diagnosing and treating patients with cystic fibrosis. So I'm a pediatric pulmonologist at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and I see a lot of patients with cystic fibrosis. So this was an area of interest to me. Cystic fibrosis is the most common genetic condition in the United States. We see a lot of patients in our clinic, and we're probably the second largest center in the country. And so when we think about how we can quickly diagnose our patients, the sweat test is the main gold standard test that we rely on to diagnose our patients. And it is currently being performed only in accredited clinical labs, and primarily the utilization is for newborns that have been screened positive on their newborn screening labs for cystic fibrosis. And then also when we're thinking about monitoring our CF patients in terms of their response to certain treatments, such as CFTR modulators, whether they're taking their treatments or not, then this test can also come in really handy. So talking a little bit about how we diagnose cystic fibrosis, you can see here, I don't want to go through this whole schematic, but just to emphasize that sweat chloride testing is central to the diagnosis of cystic fibrosis. So it's a very important test clinically. But It has been around since 1959. So prior to this method being standardized and used like this by Gibson and Cook, that's what ended up getting the name Gibson and Cook method. People were putting babies into plastic bags, covering it up to their neck, and then collecting sweat after putting them in a room where the heat had been turned up. And then after a few babies died, they finally decided, okay, maybe this is not a good way to collect sweat. So maybe we should try to standardize this method and do it in a more scientific way. So that's when they started using pilocarpine to stimulate the skin on the forearm to stimulate sweat production, and then start using that to measure the chloride concentration of the sweat to identify CF. After this method came out in 1959, there was not a lot of innovation until the 1980s when the macroduct method came about, where they incorporated this agar gel disc with pilocarpine nitrate, and then they were able to use that by using a small electrical current that would drive the pilocarpine into the skin to stimulate the sweat glands to sweat more, and then followed by this little watch-shaped device that you see at the bottom of the screen, which was a sweat collector called a macroduct collector, which has a coiled tubing inside it and a hole in the middle, which allows the sweat kind of percolate through the hole into this coiled tubing through capillary action. And so we are able to collect sweat and use that for testing in the lab. So this is how testing is performed in 2 stages. Currently, the first step is to do this induction of sweat production, and then the second is the collection. So as you can imagine, when you're trying to collect sweat in a newborn, it can be very difficult. And so this is because they have a lot of fluid shifts happening in their body. They sometimes lose weight in the first 7 days of life. And we're also using these giant electrodes, which for a newborn's tiny forearm can, as you can see, pretty much cover their entire forearm. So it can be very problematic to actually gain good contact with the skin surface. There's also that small risk of causing skin burns during the test itself because you're using electrical current. And of course, a lot of the times we find this happen where we do not get enough sweat. And so then we have to send the patient back, bring them back another day for repeat testing. That causes delay in their diagnosis. That causes anxiety for the parents who want to find out if their child has cystic fibrosis or not. And so it just creates a whole lot of delays in starting treatments. Also, the testing itself is localized to select centers, so it requires a lot of expensive equipment supplies, trained personnel, and a whole lab setup to be able to perform this test. So if you're thinking of performing this test in a remote location or perhaps in the developing world where there's not easy access to lab facilities, this can become a real challenge for diagnosing cystic fibrosis. The newer version of the macroduct collector and the pilogel discs at the bottom. So inadequate sweat collection is that significantly unmet clinical need that we're trying to solve here. And so there has been no innovation in this sweat testing procedure. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details of what we've done to get to this point, but essentially I'll just share quickly that we've been able to miniaturize the testing process and make it point of care so that the clinician can get results within a span of 30 minutes while the patient is still with them in clinic, and then talk to them about starting treatments, or even just go and talk to the parents and say, I don't think your child has cystic fibrosis, let's move on and continue routine care. So this is what led to the development of this device. And this is the current iteration. We're using a fairly complex setup where we're using microneedles to stimulate sweat production. And then we have a microchannel setup, which has a sweat chloride sensor built in so that can detect the chloride concentration and provide point of care results. So what are our next steps? We're planning to start a clinical trial to expand testing in newborns, pediatric patients with CF, and adults. And we're simultaneously working on a regulatory strategy to get this device for final clinical approval. With that, I'd like to thank at least our funding sources and the teams that have been involved. And with that, I'll turn it over to Morgan.
Actually, to Hong.
To Hong, yes.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna continue talking about our collaborative project between engineers and clinicians. And in fact, this project includes myself and Lukesh right here. similar like concepts as you just saw. It's a wearable device, but we developed a system called stethoscope. But if you look at the photo, it's different from conventional stethoscope because we design a very soft, miniaturized wearable stethoscope, such that it can be used for detecting sound, not just one time, continuously for patients. And the reason that we made this exceptionally smaller form factor is that we are targeting not only adults, but also pediatric patients. So based on this concept, we could do wireless real-time auscultation, which is different from conventional stethoscope. And again, doctors don't need to hold this device. It's like a sticker, so you can place this device anywhere, basically. So on the chest area, then we can hear the cardiac sound. And depending on location, if you put this device on the back side, then we can hear the lung sound. And this device is smart enough in a way that we could have real-time data processing on board and do the classification to detect any abnormal signals, right? So based on that real-time continuous detection of sounds, we could distinguish whether signals are abnormal. Then if it's abnormal, then what is it? Then we could detect like specific symptom, like whether it's getting like wheezing symptom, ronchi, crackle, and things like that based on our machine learning algorithm, which is also embedded. And once we get that outcome, then it will alert the outcome to the user, can be anybody, including clinicians, so that they can follow. This picture on the left-hand side is comparing our device with the conventional stethoscope. As you see that it's completely different in terms of size, but more importantly, it's completely wireless. And when you look at the material, it's soft material-based electronics. So overall weight is only 7 grams, including everything, right? All the circuits, batteries. And depending on the sampling frequency, this device can go up to multiple days for continuous sound detection. So it can be used not only at the hospital, but also at home. So once they are discharged, then this device can go with those patients so that we can continuously follow up their symptoms. And on the right-hand side, we are comparing our data set. On the top portion, you see healthy subject data, which is showing a more periodic like structure. But at the bottom, you see that asthma patient, we see like increased frequency data at the 1 kilohertz, and we definitely see the increased amplitudes as well. That's how we could distinguish automatically based on our algorithm. And overall, it's a busy slide, but here basically we are showing the outcomes of detecting multiple symptoms, the things that I mentioned earlier, within crackle, ronchi, with very high accuracy in real time. And at the same time, we added a function using actuators so that it could deliver like real-time actuation to the user if something happened, so that they can take a pill or call a doctor and stuff like that based on the outcomes that they're getting. So it's an ongoing study. I think we are pretty much finalized, and we'll submit our paper sometime soon.
Awesome. Thank you both. All right. I'll stop sharing here. So really the thank you for that wonderful background. And the point of the conversation today is really talk about your relationship between the two of you. But I couldn't help but notice that in both of your projects, you're really working on kind of there's old technology that you're updating, like the durability of the stethoscope is I mean, it's been around, I don't know, 80 years or 100 years. Hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like what do you think leads to the durability of these like old techniques?
Well, I think they've been time tested, especially with regards to the stethoscope. It has led to a lot of advances in medicine, but I think we have to keep pace with the new requirements of current day and age, where we need this option for remote monitoring, which will help us provide better care to our patients, especially if you think of rural health, where patients are living remotely and cannot travel to see a specialist long distances to have those regular visits. Or even when just parents call you and say, my child is sick, how do you determine what to do without having the ability to listen to their lungs if they have a chronic lung condition? So I think having that capability enhances us in terms of our ability to provide better care.
Yeah, well, I love that. Super exciting projects, both of them. So I'm going to switch a little bit. So in my world, I work with a lot of startups, and one of the challenges we see is finding co-founders, finding people to work with. And finding a co-founder is a little like dating. You sort of like meet them, you sort of like chat, you get coffee, and then you sort of develop a relationship and see if you can really work together. So tell me a little bit about how the two of you met, how you sort of came to form a partnership.
Do you remember?
I think so. The initial discussions for the sweat test device started off when I think a few of us were invited to give presentations at Georgia Tech. It was a combined program where we were encouraged to list some clinically unmet needs. So that's how I think I met Mark Prausnitz initially, where he was a member in the audience. He asked me a great question, which I followed up on and met with him after the discussion and actually went to his lab, saw what he was doing, and that's when we started working together. And then got Hong involved once we got to the point where we felt like this device setup needed a bit more complex electronics to be able to make it point of care. So that's where Hong got involved with this. And then once our collaboration got off, we started working well with each other. Then this opportunity to work together on the wearable stethoscope came along because he had been working on that for a long time. But this time we finally saw that there was an opportunity to utilize this in the clinical space by trying to answer this unmet need. And of course, the COVID pandemic highlighted this need for all of us in terms of being able to offer that remote monitoring capability.
Yeah, to add it, I mean, regarding the stethoscope, we got a great opportunity from the IMRE Foundation and CHOA. We saw that RFP, and then we thought it's a great project for us because as Lukesh mentioned, I already had one device that I created, and we got brilliant data set. So I think we could definitely target different patient group. And he brought me the asthma patients. So we wrote a proposal together and got it. That's how we started.
Got it. For those in the audience who don't know, the IMLE Foundation is a large philanthropic organization. It's a family actually that supports pediatric innovation at the Children's Hospital here.
Morgan, there's a couple of questions online, if it's okay if I read them.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, okay. Well, so it's about the stethoscope technology specifically. So one is automating the use of the stethoscope seems like a technique that goes beyond CF diagnosis and could potentially be an incredible triage tool. What are your thoughts on a more widespread use of this kind of technology? And then just sort of piggybacking on this, somebody chimed in and said that it could be tested to detect non-laminar blood flow, potential another possibility. So maybe you could just comment on sort of, you create this tool for a specific use. What is the thought process of sort of making it more general and using it for other things as well?
Right, regarding device, right? First of all, stethoscope, again, I designed it at the very beginning based on the motivation of replacing conventional stethoscope because I heard like limitations from people. And as I just mentioned that, based on the collaboration with Lukesh, we found a specific target, right? Based on unmet needs too. So it's not limited to a certain target group or population or disease, I believe. During my presentation, I share with you that this device can detect sound from anywhere, basically, right? Cardiac sound, pulmonary sound. And at the same time, it's not limited just listening to the sound, but also by adding other sensors, we can detect electrical signals, even like optical signals, detecting blood oxygen saturation and others. So in terms of technology standpoint, it can be expanded further so that we could target different symptoms, different disorders. I'd be happy to hear any opportunities. And again, it's not limited to one specific disorder here.
Yeah, I think the idea was to do validation so that we would show that the device has the capability to reliably detect abnormal breath sounds in a variety of clinical settings. So for an asthma patient coming to the emergency room with an acute attack of asthma, versus somebody who's got chronic asthma in the clinic who's being monitored for a follow-up visit with a pulmonologist, or perhaps they're admitted on the floor and are getting treatment, so we can sequentially monitor the change in breath sound frequencies as they respond to those treatments. So all of those things are being worked out, and that's what the validation studies are for.
Yeah, I love the depth and the breadth of the possibilities. I guess because the stethoscope is so broad, it can be used as well.
Yeah, we have another question about the device. Is that okay, Morgan?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. So have you implemented remote monitoring with this device? In that vein, have you thought about ways to utilize this hardware in LMICs or remote areas? And have you utilized ML models on top of the hardware to detect early developing lung disease?
Yeah, we have that function. So basically, we designed this for remote healthcare and wireless, and this device has that wireless capability embedded already. So we are using Bluetooth. So as long as we carry any smartphone or tablet, the data will automatically go through that interface and upload it to cloud, so that doctors like Lokesh can download and look at the data anytime. And again, it's not limited. We use Bluetooth because it's consuming less power, and everybody's carrying a smartphone. That's why it's easier for us. But when it comes to remote detection, or when you target like multiple patients, we can use other wireless platforms where we could connect one device with multiple patients and listen to the sound simultaneously.
Yeah. So this would have applicability on a hospital floor where you have multiple patients admitted, and the nurse or the respiratory therapist cannot listen to their breath sounds on an ongoing basis. So this could be something they could tap into remotely to be able to listen to any acute changes that are happening. And the addition of the machine learning component adds the capability to notify these providers of an acute change that's happening, so that they can be, notified that, oh, the patient was not wheezing a couple of hours ago, but now they've started to wheeze again, so maybe it's time for their next treatment and things like that. So I think that is the next step for this project, is once we've done the validation steps to show that this type of remote monitoring would actually work. So we had to do the validation first in more controlled settings, where we have the ability to have a human being like myself go and listen to the patient, and then also compare that with the simultaneous recording that we're getting from the device to make sure that what it detects as wheezing is indeed wheezing. And then we can move forward with the machine learning classification once we have confidence in its ability to provide that output.
Yeah, based on our prelim data sets, with limited numbers of patients, so we are trying to enhance that number, but we already developed a machine learning algorithm, which is processing the data on the device, so we could detect like wheezing, as Lokesh mentioned, and other bronchi or other symptoms. We could distinguish those differences based on our trained data sets. But obviously, we need more data sets to increase that accuracy.
And there's plenty of false alarms or perhaps artifactual signals that could creep in. So taking care of all that variability, I think, will require a larger data set, perhaps a larger study as well.
Yeah. Any funders listening, larger data sets require clinical dollars.
Yeah.
Of course.
Of course. I did see one question about the foundation I mentioned. It's called the Inlay Foundation. You can also look up the PTC, or Pediatric Technology Center, which is based at Children's and Georgia Tech. Well, I want to, anything else, Stacy, before I move on?
Go ahead.
Cool. So I want to come back to the sort of the first meeting, and I should say any event organizer, just to hear that this kind of collaboration came out of some event. That's like the gold standard for any meeting. Were there any kind of like green flags, or any kind of like personality traits, or even like skill sets that you were looking for when you were looking for a partner?
I would say the ability to listen is a good one, because as clinicians, we see lots of clinical problems, and there's a lot out there that needs to be solved. And it takes someone with the patience and the empathy to be able to relate to those problems and then be able to come up with a solution. So I think that's the biggest one that I found helps find that right sort of combination of skills.
Yeah. Anything from you, Hong?
That's the most important thing.
Always.
Chemistry, right?
Chemistry.
Like once you start talking, then
Yeah.
you immediately capture that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that matters.
Okay.
Because not all collaboration is successful. I think the main reason is coming from that chemistry. Try to work together, like understand each other's stance. Right?
Yeah. Any red flags or any something that led to a deteriorating relationship with any of your
Between us? No, we're still happily married.
No, I
Not
think
that I remember, right?
Not about you specifically. It's a
Right.
red flag that you would look out for.
Oh,
when you're
look out
looking
for.
a new partnership. Yeah.
yeah, I think being willing to listen to the other person's point of view and taking that into account as you're making decisions about how to make this project move forward, trying to come up with common goals towards applying for grants or how they envision sort of this project moving forward. As long as those things are aligned together, then I think things work much more smoothly.
That's really important because not necessarily, you guys are also thinking of the same direction, especially like considering my standpoint as an engineer or professor here at Tech versus him, clinician, right? And depending on the positions, right? For example, I started early before as an assistant, now I'm sort of senior, but depending on where I am, I'll rather focus on one thing, like let's say publishing more papers rather than making clinical impacts.
Yeah.
So they have to understand each other's position,
Yeah.
right? And somehow adjust their directions based on their common goals and the
We're
goals
really
that
talking
they
about its incentives, like what is going to
True,
move
right?
you forward,
Yeah.
which will then in turn move the project
Right.
forward.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I wonder, Lokesh, could I ask about you? You had a really nice example of the clinical needs that you talked about. Can you give an example of a clinical need that you saw and then it got translated down to the engineering level? What kind of example can you give for that?
Yeah, I think both of these cases that we discussed today are perfect examples of that, because I initially started off with that clinically unmet need, which was the unreliable sweat testing method that we have right now. And with Mark's help, we were able to standardize the sweat induction process, where we were able to use his technology to be able to reliably induce sweat production without using electrical current. So that was one step that was already solved, because you don't need expensive equipment. You don't need to refrigerate any equipment that we've made, whereas the standard of care method needs to be refrigerated, so that adds to the cost of testing. So if you're thinking of implementing this device in a low to middle income country, you don't need any of that. You can just put it on, get a result, move on. With Hong's involvement, we were truly able to make that point of care. His technology was able to add that point of care component to it. So I think has really helped move the project along, in that there was that unmet need of not having reliable sweat induction, which was solved by the addition of the microneedles, and then not having the ability to do point of care testing, which was solved by Hong's technology.
What from an engineering standpoint made it point of care? I mean, that can mean many different things.
Yeah.
How did that translate into you and your team's process?
In terms of like technical standpoint, I mean, it's a really important thing. Like again, I'm working on this sort of wearable electronic devices, and previously, before having this project started with this team, right? Because Lukash started that project first with Mark Krausnitz. And when I heard about it, I was so excited because Mark, I don't remember who approached me first, but I was getting that solution of monitoring something, but I didn't know where we have the biggest impact, right? And then as soon as I heard about this, this is it, right? Because we don't need multiple devices. Again, we can do that everything on the same system, all in one. But at the same time, I don't have a capability of, let's say, inducing sweat. So I don't know how to get that like high quality sweat. But we already have the system, so I just integrate my sensor to enable that device's capability for care. I mean, that's why it's so excited and when you're working in when you see the outcomes, right? Detecting that targets from patients, and that matters.
Yeah.
One thing that was really useful throughout this journey was that we were all sort of having these discussions on an ongoing basis, so that it was an iterative process of improving the design as we saw features being added on. I was specifically mindful of our clinical workflows, that how would this work in the clinical setting and how this could be detrimental or how this feature could be useful. So keeping all that in mind, we were able to make specific enhancements to our microchannel design, to specific things related to the sensors and whatnot. So those things helped us fine-tune the design to such a great degree that it would function regardless of the end user's comfort level or experience with the device. So it's sort of, just slap it on the skin and go.
Yeah. Was it something about like the flexibility of the sensors, or even the weight, or even the physical size?
Yeah.
Everything.
So those factors were kept in mind because of our target population ultimately is the newborns. And so you want to minimize surface area so that you take up least amount of space on their forearm, because that's the site that's clinically validated for sweat testing. And so it conforms to the contour of the forearm, it adheres better to the forearm. And once you've had enough induction of sweat production, our device would only need roughly 1/10 of the sweat that would be needed for a conventional test.
Oh, interesting. It even has less sample requirement.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that also reduces our chances of having an inadequate sweat collection, and therefore the need for repeat testing and delays in diagnosis.
Collectively, we are saying that iteration, but literally we're talking about multiple years, right?
I see. Yeah.
Because easy to say, but like when you develop the system, we are having a lot of issues of overcoming those challenges.
Yeah.
And based on this teamwork, right? We finally got the device that's working. That's how we present it. So
Yeah. You're presenting a final form here. How many iterations do you think you went through to get to where you are now?
So we've been at this since 2017, I think.
Okay.
So it's been a journey.
Long marriage. Okay.
and then in terms of my standpoint, I think I spent about 2 years adding this my sensor and electronics to the system.
Okay.
Right.
But like for us, I think we had more than 4 people spending like day and night to come up with that solution, right? To successfully collect a small amount of sweat through the microfluidic channel and print the sensors, which should be small enough and sensitive enough to detect that. So like it's a lot of work. But,
Yeah.
Okay.
working now. So
All right. Very good. Very good. We've talked a lot of good things. Has there been any areas of friction between the two teams, sort of a clinical team and an engineering team? And I wondered what are those kind of areas that may have caused friction or even just misunderstanding between the two different groups?
I think we've been pretty good about communication from the get-go. So that has helped sort of keep those to a minimum. Of course, as a clinician, I'm always busy with patient care. So that comes as the first thing for me. So there are times when I'm on call or on service at the hospital, I have to put everything aside and just focus on patient care. But on the academic side for him, things don't work that way. He has a different sort of way of looking at this, and he's going go, go, go. And I'm like, okay, hold on.
Until the R1.
And so that has taken a little bit of adjusting to each other's timelines and work schedules. So that I think has worked out well, because Hong has been really understanding of that. And that I think is a key to the collaboration.
Yeah, that's really important, right? Because again, we are living in 2 different time zones.
Yeah.
Right? Speaking different languages. So at the very beginning, I think you should have that full understanding of their life, right? Because again, different from our life. Once you have that mindset, then I think we can actually work together. And otherwise, it's different from working between engineering faculty members, right? But a lot of times, based on what I heard from my colleagues, they don't understand. They got that friction because they're not trying to be in their positions, right? So, and once you only care about your time or your your
Yeah.
own position, then
Mhm.
I don't think it's going to be working. So
Yes, say more about that misconception from your colleagues. What are they not perceiving?
So, I mean, first of all, their goals are different, right? Things that they want is different. A lot of times for engineering faculty, right, they want to get the paper coming out,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's what matters for especially pre-tenure professors. And also they want to get funding too. But not necessarily that's the case for them,
Yeah.
right?
For
Obviously.
us, it's patient impact, what can help the patient today, as opposed to getting just that paper out. And that technology that you develop just sits there on that manuscript, doesn't help the patients.
Right.
And true, and because of that, right? Because of that mindset, I don't remember when, but like multiple years ago, I didn't understand, right? Why? I mean, we develop technologies, but not necessarily that technology can be used right away, right? Depending on the manufacturing readiness level, technology level, sometimes it takes more time, right? But in terms of their standpoint, right, it needs to be reliably working. Otherwise, technically it's not useful, right? So I have to go that right, levels where it can be immediately applicable, right?
Yeah.
That takes time, right? And also, I have to somehow use my own resources or do something else so that we could mature our technology, right? The level that they want. So,
And does that mean the level that it might means that it's safe enough and it's effective
Yeah.
enough to actually put on patient, not just your grad student in the lab?
exactly.
Yeah.
That's a big gap, right?
Yeah.
When you play only with the control, for example, like healthy
Yeah.
controls, healthy subjects, everything was basically constrained. Or whenever it's coming out and targeting patients, right?
Yeah.
Things are basically open,
Right.
and then actually there are a lot of challenges that we never thought about.
Yeah. Because as clinicians, we can bring to them the information about how things work in different settings of the hospital or in clinics, because a patient with asthma coming into the ED versus a patient with cystic fibrosis being seen in clinic, those are different settings, different challenges, different considerations. So when we're talking about a monitoring device such as the wearable stethoscope, the outcomes that we're looking for are slightly different. And so that's where we have to be mindful of those changes in workflow and how the device and the technology needs to be adapted to those workflows.
Mhm. Got it. I'll dwell on this topic just a little more, which is any sort of famous or memorable failures of either the project or the device that you could think of, or either device actually you could think of.
Yeah, we had a few challenges with the first iterations of the wearable stethoscope where either it would not stick well, or perhaps the battery would die. And so
Sound quality was
sound quality was missing, or we did not get good enough recording.
Really
And
like quality of life,
Yeah.
very basic things.
That's right.
Not sticky enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So just troubleshooting through the first few patients for that taught us a lot of lessons.
But again, like I didn't see this is coming from controlled subjects,
Right. Okay.
right? That's how I learned the reality, right? That's how I faced the reality that okay, actually, whenever we work with somebody that we don't know, right? It has more challenges because the way they, like for example, in terms of patient standpoint, they don't need to be patient, like in terms of dealing with those devices, right? They don't like to be waiting, right? And depending on devices, we may need time to adjust something like here and there, connecting the device with the external interface.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously it's not a commercial device. There are hiccups sometimes, but
Right.
I mean, all those things can be uncomfortable, and also at the same time, we never thought about that. That's happening within that specific testing room, where they have a lot more equipment than we thought, and there are a lot of noise coming out.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Right? Because we normally work in
Specifically for the stethoscope.
exactly,
Yeah.
right? So that's why.
Right.
Where's that sound that we are supposed to be
Some
using?
buzzing.
Yeah. So
And patients have interventions being performed on them. So if they're on a nebulizer treatment, now you're hearing
Oh,
the
I
hum of
see.
a nebulizer
Right.
with their breath sound recordings as
Yeah.
the treatment's being given, because you can't stop their breathing treatments as the recordings are happening. So you have to mark that time point where that happened. So that way you can correlate when you go back and analyze your breath sound data, you can mark those segments of the recording to say, okay, this was, perhaps occluded by the nebulizer sound or what have you.
But I can tell you that because of these challenges, right, it's been really helpful for us to further develop our technologies that we never thought, right? That's why we could target, like higher impacts that we never thought about it, right? All the situations. So in terms of our science and technology standpoint, we are in a better position than others that they don't work with amazing clinicians like him, right? Because we don't,
They
we don't
just
think
have a
about it.
nice paper.
Yeah,
And
it's a nice paper,
Yeah.
right? But not facing the reality.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's a blessing for us, right? Having that challenge.
Yeah. Maybe you could talk a little about timing, like when you take your device and put it on real patients. Obviously you're going to learn something when you do that. When you did that and you found the problems of the nebulizer sounds, for example, would you recommend, like if you were to look back on the project, would you go to patients even earlier to learn those things? Or was that sort of, you learned them in the course of the project?
I think it depends on device and your target disease symptom or patient group, right?
Okay.
But I encourage, if somebody who wants to start collaboration, I encourage them to start early, right? And again, valuing somebody's time, right? Try to have continuous conversation early enough so that they understand situations better. And obviously we have to go through IRB and everything together. And that's also challenging for, I didn't mention it, but IRB, getting that IRB approval is super challenging depending on devices.
Yeah.
When it comes to anything sort of invasive, then it's like killing.
Right.
1 year, right? Something like that.
It's called non-invasive technology here, but
yeah, but still, right? So even non-invasive, you have different categories. So I always recommend if somebody asks, okay, you have to definitely start early and try to have that periodic discussion with your partner so that you get to know the challenge, and that's going to be going into your design phase, right? So that you can reduce that.
You get a really good user requirements.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Morgan, there's a number. Sorry to interrupt. There's a number of questions popping up about just how medical systems can really facilitate these kinds of interactions, and then also where this particular device is in the commercialization readiness pathway. And I wondered if I could just quickly interject and ask a couple questions, because I think it gives the audience context. Since they heard that this has been first developed or conceived of in 2017, what can really be accomplished in essentially 8 years? And so first with that, where is the technology currently in the FDA approval or clinical trial process? And what is the next step moving forward with these devices and technologies?
So for the sweat test device, we just wrapped up a clinical study where we did testing on 10 healthy adults and 5 cystic fibrosis adults. And we're in the process of gathering some additional data. We have a paper under review, and we're planning that next clinical trial, which will also include the newborn population. And as we're working on that, we're simultaneously also working on our regulatory strategy, meeting with some regulatory people here at Georgia Tech and external, so that we can formulate a path forward for getting this device to the final stage, which is FDA approval, and then hopefully, get this device into clinical use. So that's where we are with the sweat device. For the wearable stethoscope also, we just wrapped up a clinical study where we had patients recruited not only here in the United States, but also in Korea. And so with that, we've been able to integrate the data from the 2 sites and be able to show that the device works in a variety of settings. And then further validation, of course, will require additional studies as well. For especially like at-home use, it's going to require a much larger study design, right, to be able to show its feasibility and usefulness.
Yeah, I can say that the sweat device is more mature than the stethoscope one because it's relatively new, and we need more data sets, and we haven't started to talk about like regulatory paths and other things yet. So,
Okay, so
Yeah.
essentially, not for the faint of heart is what we're hearing.
Yeah. And I think for the audience, it's not uncommon for these kinds of devices to have a 10-year, sort of idea to, commercial approval patient. 10 years can be common. So let's see, what'd you say? 2017?
2017, 18-ish, yeah, roughly.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you
7 years.
You're in 7 years. You got
Yeah.
3 more to go.
Yeah. Time's ticking. Yeah.
Let's see. We have a number of questions here. Maybe I'll pick a few of these. Let's see. We answered that one already. Actually, this is a good one about partnerships. So Erica asks, did partners start full time, and was there funding to pay for FTE? So I guess maybe could you talk a little bit about the mechanics of the partnership? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, so essentially on the clinical side, when we're talking about doing some patient testing, we have to have some support for a research coordinator to be able to recruit patients from clinic, and then for clinicians also to be involved in overseeing the testing. So some of the initial funding we got from CF-AIR, and then followed by the ACME POCT, and now more recently from the CTIP, has been very helpful in moving the project through its various stages to where it is now. And so we just have to be very creative in terms of outlining those needs, because we have to balance the budget in terms of the coverage on the clinical side with the coverage on the Georgia Tech side for manufacturing and production of the devices and for testing. On the clinical side, I handle most of the IRB applications and the regulatory aspect to try to help out and speed up that process. And then we have material transfer agreements and collaborations between the two institutions that help facilitate that kind of transfer. So that has been very instrumental in sort of moving this collaboration forward and allowing these patient-based testing to take place.
Yeah. So that's a nice segue into one of my last questions here, which is about institutional support. What does it take from at the highest level, children's at Georgia Tech to support this kind of collaboration, but even at the more lower level, like, how much money does it take to like have these clinical coordinators to support?
Yeah,
you said 4 grad students working on this more time, right? That's not inexpensive. And so what do you need? What has been provided by the institutions, and maybe what would you have wanted to be provided but did not work so well?
I mean, in terms of engineer standpoint, again, as I told you that depending on the complexity of devices and also maturity level that you're targeting, it may require a lot of work, meaning like many resources, including personnel, even facilities, manufacturing capabilities. I mean, Georgia Tech is basically amazing in terms of that standpoint because we have pretty much everything. However, when it comes to hiring people, right, you need money basically. So I get these questions from young professors and young assistant professors because they don't necessarily have all the required resources. Then how can they like kick off and start something with clinicians? So I normally ask them, okay, you could, first of all, once you're young enough, then you have startups, so you could somehow leverage that. But at the same time,
startup for everyone is money that's usually provided to early career investigators.
Correct. Yeah. And at the same time, like for Georgia Tech, we have many different resources. We have different institutes. We call it as IRI, Interdisciplinary Research Institution. We have Eric here, but obviously we have that great platform where they offer those resources to seed ideas, right? And somehow covers our time too. So try to find those opportunities so that you can spare some time for initiating that project. And also at the same time, you have to be honest with your partner so that, start finding those funding opportunities right away, right? Sooner than later, right? Because for a successful project or for a sustainable relationship, you have to make outcomes, right? If for example, if I don't make any outcome for a year, right? And I don't call him, and I think he get bored. He may forget about this project too, right? So it needs to be active, and to do so, you need resources. So you have to be very proactive and ask help, and also again targeting the same goals, understanding funding situation and
Yeah. On the clinical side, I think it's important to be mindful that these initial device feasibility kind of studies help you gather that preliminary data for applying for those larger grants. Okay. And so, one thing that has been unique about the Emory Georgia Tech infrastructure or the ecosystem has been that investigators are provided those opportunities for smaller grants that can get them off the ground. So in our case, we were lucky with the sweat test device to have CF Air provide that support initially to us to show that, yes, this approach is actually feasible.
And CFAIR is a foundation.
So it's the one of the research centers within Emory that is focused on cystic fibrosis and airway inflammation research.
Okay.
And so they have a funding program for pilot projects that allows that initial investment into these sort of high risk, high reward type of projects that can lead to good outcomes down the road. And so we got started with that, and then as long as you have the basic infrastructure in place and you leverage all the regulatory resources that are available within the system, you should be able to move things along. It takes a lot of coordination and work on both sides, on both teams, to be able to walk through those steps and those regulatory requirements to be able to fulfill all that. And I think that's where people who are interested in this kind of work need to understand the local landscape and what are the regulatory requirements for that.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've gotten pilot funding from Georgia Tech, Children's, Emory. Have you gotten federal funding or other sources of funding as well?
We're in the process. I think we had some applications to the CF Foundation, which unfortunately did not get funded, but certainly we're trying now to move towards an NIH application.
Got it. Okay.
we need papers proving our
Papers.
collaborative
Yes.
outcomes. So that's why.
More patience, more papers.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
True.
So those are all the good things the institutions have provided. I know working interinstitution. So I'm from Emory, and we work interinstitution often, and it is a pain in the ass.
Can
Can you say I can say that I've dealt with the bureaucracy. So I guess maybe talk about some of the challenges or things that, if you were to advise a younger, earlier career clinician or engineer, what would you sort of look out for and sort of warn them like, hey, this is a challenge. You need to focus on this aspect.
I think we have more to say.
Yeah, so I think for a person starting out on this journey, I would say start with the clinical problem, not the technology. The technology will come to you. Be focused on that. And then also spend time understanding what are the regulatory requirements. Okay, this project is human subjects research. I'm going to require Emory IRB, but I also have to get sign off from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I also have to create a material transfers agreement between Georgia Tech and Emory to make that transfer happen. So all those things have to be done sort of in parallel as you're getting started on your journey. And so being aware and being or maybe even just working with someone who has done this before and can guide them through that process would be helpful so that they're not learning by making mistakes.
Right.
So that's really critical.
Yeah, same thing for us as well, right? In terms of faculties at Georgia Tech, if you haven't tried this before, then you have to understand the mechanisms, right? You have to definitely go out and find your senior faculty who could tell you, right, the lessons.
Yeah, this is what's happened. Yeah.
Right, and also, although you are not dealing with patients locally here at Tech on campus, you still have to get IRB approval, right? Based on
Georgia Tech IRB
Georgia Tech IRB approval based on your partner institutions or your hospital.
Yeah.
Right. People don't know about that unnecessarily because they don't think that okay, we don't do any human subject study here, but still you need to have that IRB approval. So all those little things that you have to be understanding, and I encourage you to talk to IRB people at Georgia Tech too, because they do know those processes based on the prior projects.
Yeah. And just for the audience, when Lokesh says regulatory, we're often talking about IRB and protections for human subjects is the primary thing that we're talking about. Regulatory.
Yes.
Say a little about intellectual property. How is that handled with these projects?
Yeah, so both Emory and Georgia Tech have very good mechanisms in place for filing invention disclosures and perhaps also working together with each other in terms of, working collaboratively to decide, okay, this project requires, filing for an application which should be done jointly, but perhaps maybe because a lot of the work is being done at Georgia Tech or at Emory, you can decide which site would take the lead on that or which one will take the ownership of that.
Mhm.
So that has been a very collaborative endeavor, and I think that part of the process has worked really smoothly.
I love to hear that. I don't always hear that.
Yeah.
But I love to hear that. That's right.
I mean, for us, I think we didn't have any problem. But again, this IP related stuff, you have to also be crystal clear from the beginning as well, right?
Between the two of you.
Between two of us, for example, right? Because again, not necessarily everybody is on the same page in terms of expectation.
Yeah.
So you have to be
And discussing that up front,
right.
right
That's
at the
what
start of the project.
exactly.
This is how we're gonna move forward with this IP.
Yeah.
What is gonna be my role on this project, and clear outline of those expectations and those responsibilities. I think.
Because you have to put that number in terms of contribution, right?
Right.
To the outcome. So you have to be crystal clear and have to be honest as well, right?
In all of my projects, we always do it at the end, right? When they're disclosing, it's probably not how you're supposed to do it.
Sometimes that's not working well.
Yeah.
So, well,
So last question is, what's the next? What's your path to get either of these products to market? You think you'll form a company, a license,
you
or
wanna do it?
I mean, we have some ideas, but we're definitely discussing it as a group since this is a group activity, a group project. So we're trying to get feedback from the regulatory consultants and move towards a 510(k) path where we have a predicate device for the sweat testing device that could allow us to get approval and then hopefully, I guess, license out the technology and see if somebody else wants to manufacture it so that we could then get it to patients.
all right?
I don't think he wants to be the founder or CEO.
I do not hear that desire.
Yeah, so I mean,
My main interest is that it should get to patients. That's all I care about, I think. And so if our patients can benefit from our work together, then I would have felt like this was a success.
yeah, regarding for stethoscope, I'm still thinking about it. About the next phase. Once we have better understanding of IP landscape and others, maybe we can discuss more about wonderful possibility.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your story, sharing your technology. Thanks to the audience for sticking around this long. If you don't mind, we will share a survey at the end of this, either by email or some mechanism. If you wouldn't mind giving us feedback, we'd really appreciate it. And yeah, this is our last glue for the year. So happy holidays. Thanks all for joining.
Thank you.